Hey, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good late night, whenever you happenstance into this Truth Bomb riff by your friend Patrick Lovell on Saturday, May 20th at 2023 at 7:45 p.m. my time. And I'm going to try to keep this one short again, but I just got off the phone with some really cool people out of California that definitely speak my language. And, it was cool because usually when I push play on these truth bombs. I'm kind of reacting to some news story, and I'm trying to convey to you a lot of you know information that I have to try to penetrate what it is that a lot of people that are in mainstream media that supposedly have millions of viewers, or people that are a part of online, let's say reactionary media that have tens of millions of more viewers than mainstream media, and they're all talking about specific things that have touchstone points or what's important to them but vis-a-vis corruption to the information that I have, but nobody can put the picture together. And ultimately that's because everybody's reacting to the algorithm circus. It's like, who's everybody talking about now? There's kind of a high school sort of ploy to it. There's a popularity thing. It's like, okay, so it's really hard to keep our minds square on anything on long enough for us to fully understand a subject. And that's just the nature of what we're dealing with in 2023 by way of media. It comes with the territory. So, what was interesting about this conversation that I just had, though, is that there are pockets of you out there. I know there's millions of you. I know there's tens of millions of you out there that are tracking on what it is that I've got. And these are the things that answer all of the questions that you have as it relates to a lot of head scratching scenarios that you're trying to overcome in your neck of the woods. And however you do that, and we've got to find a way to come together. And I think it's we're not that far apart. I think that there's a way to blast down one wall here, tripwire something there, domino something here, and then suddenly there's this mass convergence where everybody has this sort of epiphany where it's like, yo, have you heard about this dude named Patrick Lovell? He's a guy that was the producer of The Con. He spent 13 years putting all of these elements together because he had lived through a disaster like millions of us did, where he actually, had this sort of human experience of losing everything that was important to him, at the same time finding everything that mattered. And my God, this dude's got the answers, and he's not trying to overwhelm us with him because it's not about him. It's about the information he found that relates to all of us because you plus me equals we, the people. And that's my message. And I just know because I've been around this country so many times that there's terrific people everywhere. And there's great people I always connect with. And if we can try to find a way to really get lock and step and sync with the information I have, we're going to do something that nobody's ever done in recent history and maybe change history because it's time. It has been time for the last literally 20 years. For those of you who watch my truth bombs, you know that I say it feels like Groundhog Day because the same problems we're facing in 2023 are just manifestations of things that we knew in the late 90s. We actually knew this stuff going back to the 70s. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse because of the consolidation and the conspiracy of power, which has been built by a mammoth betrayal to the American people because it hijacked the power of a government of by the people to thwart corruption. And that's central to everything. The tumor is corruption. And I have been able to discover how the whole thing intersects with our financial engine that is fueled by the central bank and ultimately what that means in context to the last 13 years. But last night, I think, and this happens to me all the time, I was really tired. I was strung out. I'm dealing with a lot of personal issues that I mentioned last night that I don't want to talk about too much because it's really sad. I'm going through a divorce, the final stages of it after a 22-year odyssey, and it's nothing I would ever wish on anyone. And I know many of you have been there, but it's all part and parcel to the collapse of the economy, the country, the American middle class, upward mobility, dynamism, all predicated on this betrayal that has become my obsession. And I'm finding that, and I've used this analogy a lot in the past, that I'm like, trying to think of Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when he became obsessed with this vision of the Devil's Tower and he started building it everywhere and it destroyed his life and his family and his domestic life, but he wasn't the only one who saw the Devil's Tower. And that was the point of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because all of these other people knew the same story and they all had to come together. So that's basically what I'm talking about. So, for example, in mainstream culture, if you will, and just kind of pop culture, some of the best stuff comes out of television. And some of the most insightful people are writers. Interestingly enough, I stand in solidarity with all of the writers that are on strike for the Writers Guild. And I am a writer myself, but I'm not a WGA writer, although I do have a couple of scripts that are registered with the WGA. But I stand in solidarity for all the reasons that we should all stand in solidarity, quite frankly, because what's happening in Hollywood is really what could happen to everyone. And on one side of the equation, I think it's kind of funny because AI could replace everybody in mainstream media, and that we could just script it and nobody would know the difference between Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson, a fake one that just basically has a script that tells everybody what they're doing every day, and they could just make an AI thing out of it. And I say that tongue in cheek because AI could be the last nail in the coffin. But going back to my pop culture reference, look, last night I was watching Succession, and it's been a great season. After Logan Roy died unexpectedly in episode 3, and we move forward, and the family is positioning, and the children are doing what they do, and they're doing a great job. But then they had to go to the dark side, and it shows really this sort of expression of the game mentality, and what people do in their interest, and what they're willing to do, and how they're willing to do it, and so forth. And one of the characters, I'm trying to think of his name. They're all Roy. He's the younger brother. Okay, he's not Kendall Roy. He's the younger brother, and I should know his name. But he said this line last night that was grotesquely profound in exactly the way it is. He says when they're trying to determine whether or not this whole thing is a mirror of what took place during the 2020 election and the Stop the Steal and the electioneering engineering and the fraud and everything that led to the insurrection and everything else. And so this story is a mirror of everything that was going on there. And this character says, America is a giant pussy because it likes to get fucked. That's how he justified it. It's just like America just they want to be damaged, they want to be raped, they want to be controlled. It was a horrible reference, but God damn it if it wasn't just exactly on the money. America's a giant pussy that just likes to get fucked. That's how he was justifying behind the scenes lying about certain things that he knew as Fox Media, right? Because the Roy family is all, basically it's a fictional expression of the Murdochs, but right, fiction is stranger than reality, or vice versa, I should say, reality stranger than fiction. And, I was just on top of it all. I'm just like, oh my God, really, America, you just, it's so easy to manipulate, particularly on the right. The MAGAs are just like, if it's from up top and everybody in their tribe is saying it, then they're going to immediately cast out any sort of thing that's important. I mean, I consider a lot of people that go to church and they're taught the doctrines of Jesus Christ, and they're like justifying Jesus while supporting a guy like Trump. You can't do it. You can't be against corruption and for Trump. It's an impossibility. But millions do it every single day. And that's just part of the equation, but that's a big part of it. And as it relates to, what it is that I'm revealing and what I'm pounding the rock of truth, and I just had this fantastic conversation with these guys that, I think are going to maybe be a vector to bring in a lot of people and start getting this thing some momentum. But look, I mean, everybody's talking about corruption. Everybody's talking about somebody else's brand of corruption or being guilty of some kind of corruption. And again, what have we seen in the last month, right? In addition to seeing bank runs that are now happening again and have continued, which reveals everything that I've been jumping up and down about is that the Federal Reserve has been bailing out criminal activity in our financial system, which makes moral hazard and all of the other things that just blow up any idea of free market capitalism to the moon. It's fucking ridiculous. No, it's not. It's just corporate fascism undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses socialism to pay the mafiocracy, which is now fueling fascism. And there's so many of you out there that are just really good, genuine, decent people, especially those that have gotten railroaded by this thing. And you're desperate. Maybe you've been like me. Maybe you've just laid it on the line and, lost your family in the mix, and you'll never get those years back. And, you think to yourself, is there ever an end to this? And will people ever get it? And can there ever be justice? And, can we ever be whole again? And are we the United States of America, or are we something different? We're something different. We're not the United States of America. The law doesn't matter. The law hasn't mattered for a long time. It doesn't have any integrity, I'll tell you that. The stuff that we have revealed over and over and over is that in the con at www.thecon.tv, you'll find that we've laid out the entire story of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended. And that was just leading up to the 2008 great financial crisis. I've got 300 hours on the shelf that I couldn't get made because we got suppressed by the system that doesn't want you to know what happened. And what happened? Well, a giant fraudulent international racketeering ring led by our financial system set up tens of millions of people based on liar's loans, all sorts of shit that went in through the derivatives to the tune of like $600, $800 trillion that blew up the world. And when it all came crashing down on millions of people, tens of millions of people around the world, it connected the most vulnerable from the African American communities. And a lot of people in the African American community, by the way, were educated, doctors, professionals, whatever. They got targeted just like poor people in the African community. Okay? And they were all connected ultimately to pensions of the white working class. So if you can imagine MAGA meets, Black Lives Matter, that's, and then everybody else and everybody in between. And they collapse everybody. And then they created a culture war, identity politics war, which is all this other shit that's happening in mainstream media, as we've seen on display. Of course, we saw Fox and News Corp pay up $787 million because they revealed that they're a platform of lies. And I doubt that's actually hurt their bottom line since they paid out $787 million. Can you, the MAGA audience doesn't care that they're a bunch of liars. It's like they're our liars. Are you fucking insane? How many of you have gotten your lives destroyed by this combination, this confluence of Wall Street and, your livelihood destroyed, your pension, everything that you work for, your investments and everything else, and what you're going to go to Donald Trump? Donald Trump is a mid-level player that's been involved with this his whole life. He's the embodiment. He's a reflection. He is guilty of everything that I revealed to you and then some, but he's a small level player. And that brings me to, in context, to everybody on Wall Street, the big boys on Wall Street. And that brings me to, a guy that was once one of my favorite writers, Matt Taibbi, and him and Russell Brand and Jimmy Dore and company. They're talking about this guy, John Durham, in this special counsel investigation of the FBI that somehow validates everything that Taibbi has been talking about, for years, going back to Russiagate. But Russiagate never dealt with the intersection between Vladimir Putin in Russia, Deutsche Bank in between, and Donald frickin' Trump. Are you kidding me? The special counsel didn't look into that. The impeachment process didn't look into that. The DOJ didn't look into that. And yet it's so obvious. Have you read, Towers of Secrecy by that crack journalist who I interviewed, who is the top editor for financial fraud at the New York Times, David Enrich? Yeah. Are you kidding me? But the fact is, it's like on the sidelines in terms of people's understanding and comprehension. And so you put those things together, it's like, how could we have probably the best financial fraud crime journalist that ever existed in American history become what he is now. I'll tell you how. Algorithms and where the money is. The MAGAs respond in mass to these stories of which are real stories that are important stories, like the Twitter files and everything else, but they're cherry picked, one dimensional stories that every single platform that we've all been critical of, particularly Taibbi's been critical of everybody. CNN, are you kidding me? It's a propaganda platform. Fox, it's a deceptive platform for MAGAs. MSNBC, the same for identity politics. And so who am I? I'm the guy that went the distance because nothing made sense, because I lived it, and then I discovered, wait a second, there's something more going on here. And because I am a producer and because I come from a political science background and I've been in Hollywood, I just know how to put shit together. It's hard and it's expensive. And that's exactly what media got rid of. Media is a complete fail. They've all lied to us. It's high school. You pay high-level anchors to basically refract and project and provide opinion on people that are beltway press and access journalists and everything else, and nobody's telling the real story about anything. Take it back to 9/11. Nobody knows anything about Saudi. Nobody's anything about the CIA. I mean, we do, but the population in mass. And I've said this on some of my social media contacts and everything else that, if you knew Saudi Arabia got away with 9/11 and our top guys in finance and the military industrial and oil complex were in on it, would that change your view of how America operates? What if you found out that everything about the 2008 great financial crisis that destroyed 50 million people in the United States and tens of millions of people around the world led to the largest wipeout in history, rug pull in history, based on racketeering on a global scale that led to $30 trillion going to the guys that did it all? And then they bought our government. And then they've got another 40 trillion since. There's 1,000 billion and a trillion. When Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan and, I don't know, George Santos or whatever are talking about Hunter's laptop, for everything that might be involved with Burisma and some corruption with Ukraine and all of that other type of stuff, in comparison to what I'm talking about, guys, it's like comparing a pebble of sand to the size of the sun. And I could go on and on and on. I just wanted to say, I got to keep this fresh in your mind. I got to keep it relevant to what you're going through. I've got to create a connection with millions of people that finally go, this dude, Patrick Lovell, is the guy that is my kind of guy, because he wants to have a country of, by, and for the people, where we, the people, live in a society that's dynamic, that's thriving, that can achieve anything because it has the integrity of law, and the bad guys get held to account. Just like what I thought we were the whole time I grew up. I'm not that naive. Are you kidding? When I grew up in the 80s, in the 90s, and going back to the 70s, I mean, my God, where I grew up in Houston, Texas, was the murder capital of the world for a long time. I mean, shit, anything could happen, right? And I saw crazy stuff. I mean, from when I grew up in the 80s, I mean, think about the crack epidemic. And then we knew about, Pablo Escobar and Contragate and Marion Barry and all sorts of fucking whacked out shit that led to then, of course, that era of financial fraud and the SNLs, the savings and loan crisis, and the Michael Milken and junk bonds. And that was all round one of what ultimately became what is. And then by the time we get to the Clinton administration, yeah, they were very successful, and they were the only ones who had a surplus budget, for years and years and years, because of all of the deregulation that took place that led to ultimately everything from the tech bubble to the Enron era frauds, and then ultimately the great financial crisis. And then in 2023, I mean, we're right back at it. And don't ask me to go into details about COVID, because that's really not my bag, baby, as Austin Powers might say. But, I am interested in a lot of what I'm hearing from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And, the pharmaceutical influence of this country is, just another part of the stool of corruption, obviously. I mean, I certainly know a lot about the opioid epidemic and the stories of the Sackler family and that sort of thing. The pursuit of profit by these financial behemoths that uses criminality and racketeering and deceptive acts and practices has overrun our society. It's all a facade. Like I said today on Twitter, since 2009, 10% of the population did okay. And the top 5% really well, and the top 1% great, and the top 0.001%, are you fucking kidding me? But it was all based on a facade. It was all based on free money in and the Federal Reserve buying assets. That's what we call quantitative easing. It's looting for the rich. And that's an aristocracy. That's not a democracy. And we have all of these ginormous problems underneath it in the face of the biggest problems we've ever faced in the history of the world, climate change and everything that's associated with that. So what I'm appealing to you to understand is I've got all the answers in the con. I'm creating a tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption, because if you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in decency, dignity, integrity, liberty, sustainability, then together we can create unity to purge the misery of tyranny. And that's our destiny, because I am fighting for a clean New Deal, because you got to get rid of the tumor of corruption if you're going to bring in the new enlightenment. Yeah, guys, that's what I'm the symphony conductor of. And what I'm going to do is I've got to raise from small donations, contributions, investments, and $13 increments, because that's what I created in honor of the original 13 colonies that gave us separation of powers and the Bill of Rights to begin with. And ultimately, if we can grow like that Breck commercial, for those of you who are from the 70s like I am, and so on and so on and so on, when this starts to morph, the reason it has to be from the bottom up is because, yeah, I can play ball and talk to some of the top people in Hollywood. I can talk to celebrities. I can try to get them going. And in a lot of cases, they come on board and they will, and all sorts of maneuverings and this and that. But that's secondary to millions of us coming together with the truths that we've already put out there, because the con's going to disappear from history. We're going to pull it on June 30th. My executive producer, who I was a partner with forever, is going to pull it because it's not making any money. There's no market for truth. And why would he spend a ton of money having it on platforms when nobody's going to watch it? There was like over 100 million plus people that were victims of the 2008 Great Financial Crisis. And whether it was some form of, tech censorship or shadow banning, or you just in your mind, a logjam with too much information where you can't, put all of this stuff together, and you don't see the forest for the trees. And you're like, I don't know you, Patrick. I don't know you from Adam. I just see you pop up on my YouTube feed from time to time. I don't know. Check out my work. Go to the www.thecon.tv. Check out the Real Progressives, The New Untouchables, which is a podcast we did that has insane answers that proves a shit ton about the Federal Reserve above all else. And also I've got Truth Bombs, the Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs, The Con, and Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs, The Con on YouTube and TikTok. So that's my message for this evening. Remember why can't I think of his name? It wasn't Kendall Roy. God, I know it's right on the tip of my tongue. The younger brother who I love, he's just a schmarmy motherfucker. But he says, America's a pussy that just likes to get fucked. I don't know about you. That's not me. Not to say there's anything wrong with that. Whatever. I don't want to get myself into trouble here. The bottom line is that I don't like to be taken advantage. I never want to be roofied. I never want to be raped. And if I did, I'd fight like a motherfucker. You know what I mean? Yeah. What he's saying is that America's a laydown. America is not going to fight back. America's going to let you do whatever you want to her. And if you're somebody with a lot of money and you got power and control, they're not going to fight back. That was the message. They're not going to do anything about it. And you know what? He's right. Because we haven't really, after Occupy Wall Street got beat down by the man, and then of course the billionaires created the Tea Party, and then they morphed it into MAGA. And MAGA is the only one who's been protesting. I'll never forget watching the insurrection, and I was scratching my head going, okay, we're about to have a revolution, and it's these guys? And by the way, this is the final thing I'll say about that. Many of you know about Q, right? Q is a fascinating scenario, and I think it's all deep state the rug pull and turnabout based on the NSA and stuff that we know took place, to develop Q and all of the 4chan and all that kind of stuff. But right now, there's this hijacking of Anonymous. Anonymous was the total Occupy Wall Street guys that were these tech dudes that were like, we are Legion, and there was a way it worked, and there were certain things that they did. It's been hijacked by the right. I'm telling you right now, it's all over YouTube. And they're making these like propaganda videos that are going to usher in the new wave of, I promise you, the next wave of anti-Semitism is going to get huge. And the reason it's going to get huge is a lot of what I've been saying the whole time. But you got to understand the scenarios here, okay? So some of the worst actors in this entire calamity of fraud that I've revealed to you happen to be Jewish in both the financial industries and in entertainment, or I should say in media, okay? If Hitler had that information, he would certainly weaponize the living shit out of it. So you've got Robert Rubin, Larry Summers, Alan Greenspan, Larry Fink, Steven Schwartzman, Sheldon Adelson. I could go on and on and on. Billionaires, guys that are very successful, and then of course, and that's all in finance. And of course, everybody they're all over Soros. Have you ever noticed that the right goes after Soros because he's funded a lot of left-wing programs? They never mention Adelson or any of these other guys that are funding right-wing stuff. Larry Fink. Well, he's not funding that, but who am I thinking? Well, Mercer's not Jewish. But anyway, the bottom line is a lot of bankers in finance and guys that are responsible for this calamity that I'm talking about just happen to be Jewish, right? Harvey Weinstein in entertainment, one of my favorite executive producers of all time, Jewish. Then you've got the likes of, Jeffrey Zucker, who brought in Trump and let Trump get, tens of millions of dollars of free advertising, basically, because it was good for ratings. Okay, that guy's Jewish. And then, Les Moonves, I have a feeling is, and there's a lot of major titans and, CEOs of, entertainment operations and producers, that are Jewish too. If they're in on this stuff, this bag of tricks, this insane corporate collusion and fascism, corporate fascism that I call it, which is obviously ironic if they're Jewish, right? But the bottom line is they're not doing this because they're Jewish. They're just dicks. Just like, the woman who worked at Harvey Weinstein HR, who was setting up women because, she was getting something out of it. There was a African-American CEO at Merrill Lynch, or was it Morgan Stanley? It was Merrill Lynch. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Yeah, he was involved with all this stuff. And then, of course, we elect President Obama on this populist movement for change we can believe in. And he puts in Eric Holder, an African-American, the first African-American Attorney General of the United States. And the way they basically uphold, all of those progressive movements that put these guys into positions of power, what do? And I could put Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court Justice, in it. What do? They're corrupt as fuck. Holder came out of Covington and Burling, whose law firm was responsible for the robo-signing madness, and so much more. Guys, identity politics is really not the thing that we need to be worried about. We need to be worried about systemic corruption. We need to be worried about the tumor of corruption. The pathway, the battle has to get tens of millions of people to join this movement to purge corruption. $13 at a time. If I get 13 million people, that's $169 million. That'd be a war chest to be able to create a new party. But I'm going to do a podcast before all of that happens. And then, if we can get the money to do it, I'm going to take a barnstorming like Live Aid tour to showcase corruption to everybody to bring us all together. Like I said, if you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi get involved, then we purge tyranny, right? And that's this whole movement. And so the reason why you want to put skin in the game is, first, everybody's got to put skin in the game. Second, I got $4.5 million into this thing, so that means 347,000 of you would have to put $13 in to match what I've already done to get this information. And then ultimately, but I've got the $29 trillion truth from the guys at the FBI, the DOJ, the SEC, and the AGs around the country that prove millions of people just got freaking destroyed in the courts illegally. We've got right now people in courts trying to save their homes, trying to prove a negative because this monstrosity of corruption with what we call foreclosure mills, which are law firms that are handpicked by the state generally to do the dirty deeds, where they use documentation fraud. And these judges have seen these cases over and over and over, but they just let it happen and nobody's stopping it. And same with servicers. So that's what I have to say tonight. Look, we've got the answers in the hands and in the minds and the hearts of tens of millions of Americans who aren't suckers, who aren't bitches, who don't want to get fucked, okay? Who would rather probably rise, roar, and revolt and rip back the corruption from the corrupt motherfuckers that need to get their comeuppance and everything that comes with it. That's what I'm leading. because we got to save the USS Titanic. It's already gone down. It's sunk. We're in the next phase. I don't know what phase we are, but the bottom line is that if we don't come to save the day, nobody else will. Nobody else is going to save us. That I guarantee. Onwards and upwards.